Still using SSH keys, RDP logins, and database credentials? It's time to access your infrastructure like it's no longer 1999. StrongDM is the only modern infrastructure access platform. It creates a seamless, secure, and observable air gap between your staff and the critical infrastructure that powers your company. Instantly revoke access to every database, Kubernetes cluster, or server with a click. Automatically log every query, SSH, and kube control command to know who did what, when, and where across your stack. Eliminate credentials from end-user workflows to deploy access that's zero trust and least privilege by default. Trusted by your peers at Peloton, SoFi, Yext, and Chime, StrongDM is the only way to deploy secure access controls in a way folks love to use. But who believes an ad? Check it out for yourself with a no BS demo. Sign up at www.strongdm.com/get-a-demo.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. It is, for a lot of folks in a lot of places of the world, it's Father's Day. It is, sort of middle to late June here in 2022. Happy Father's Day to everybody out there who, is a father, celebrating their father, maybe a father in the future. Sunday Perspective show. Excited to get back to doing a Sunday Perspective show. And today we're going to do one that, a few weeks ago I did one that was kind of targeted at, what do you do career-wise? What are you thinking about if the industry gets a little down, a little soft, and so forth? And we walked through a bunch of things to think about in terms of, some career choices, some ways to think about training yourself, some opportunities, this, that, and the other. And this one I really want to kind of focus on. There's a lot of tweets that are floating around from folks, whether they're VCs or whoever, kind of saying, look, we haven't seen this sort of kind of slowdown in the economy, slowdown in tech, and so forth in about 13 years. And they're really kind of pointing back towards 2008 when we had the financial crash kind of across the world, but that also impacted tech because tech becomes a larger and larger line item in a lot of companies' budgets. And when, companies are struggling, tech tends to sort of follow along. So what I thought I would do in today's Sunday Perspective is sort of talk to the folks who maybe haven't been through this before. Most of your career, I think I read somewhere, if you're 37 years or younger, you really probably haven't experienced any sort of real downturn, at least sort of systematic downturn, broad industry downturn. You may have experienced some things individually. So what I thought I would do is spend some time after the break kind of talking about what are some of the things you're going to start to see in the industry that'll change, especially as the economy gets more difficult. We see some impact of budget decisions and economic decisions and government decisions and so forth. And so we're going to dig into that after the break. And once again, happy Father's Day. Today's show is sponsored by Ravello. Having a hard time hiring engineers? Ravello lets you sidestep the competitive U.S. talent market by helping you hire skilled remote engineers in Latin America. They provide full-time senior engineers with 5+ years of experience who are embedded in your team like a normal hire. Ravello is an end-to-end solution that handles sourcing, vetting, hiring, payroll, and compliance. They also don't force you to pay for things you don't want, like a project manager. You can interview any engineer before deciding. All engineers are proficient in English and have high time zone alignment with US-based teams. You don't have that painful 24-hour turnaround where you have a question for an engineer who is on the other side of the world. Check out Ravello today. Go to ravello.com/cloudcast. Check it out. That's REVELO.com/cloudcast. Today's episode of the Cloudcast is sponsored by Datadog, a real-time monitoring platform that unifies metrics, traces, and logs into one tightly integrated platform. Datadog APM empowers developer teams to identify anomalies, resolve issues, and improve application performance. Begin collecting stack traces, visualizing them as flame graphs, organizing them into profile types such as CPU, I/O, and more. Teams can search for specific profiles, correlate them with distributed traces, and identifies slow or underperforming code for analysis and optimization. Plus, with Datadog APM Live Search, you can perform searches across the full stream of ingested traces generated by your application over the last 15 minutes. Try Datadog APM free with a 14-day trial, and Datadog will send you a free t-shirt. Visit datadog.com/APM-Cloudcast to get started. That's datadog.com/APM-Cloudcast. And we're back. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're going to focus this show mostly on folks who, maybe you're probably, like I said, 37, 38 and younger, folks who haven't maybe lived through sort of a broad economic downturn. I mean, I guess everybody's lived through the last 2 years with COVID, but the economics of how things change over the last couple of years is very different than what happens when we do have a fairly broad economic change, either within your region or across the globe. And specific to tech, I kind of want to highlight a few things that folks may want to kind of keep an eye out for, because things start to get a little bit weird, especially if you've been sort of in our industry for the last 4 or 5 years, 5, 6, 7 years, where for the most part there have been some huge cyclical changes, kind of industry-wide changes. I mean, we've gone from even if I just think about sort of the history of the Cloudcast, if you listen for a long time, when we first got started, it was very on-prem centric. It was private cloud centric. Public cloud was sort of a new thing. I mean, AWS was, a sub-$1 billion industry, which is hard to believe now that they're, kind of creeping up and being like an $80 billion company. We saw a lot of kind of what does it mean to move to the cloud? Should I move to the cloud? And then, as we go back 5, 6 years, 7 years, we started to see a huge movement around, hey, we should build applications differently. So the whole movement of, microservices, moving away from monolithic applications to microservices, breaking things up, distributing them. We've seen a huge push around open source, right? We saw the Cloud Native Computing Foundation get created. We saw Kubernetes get created in containers, and, an explosion of projects around, what's called cloud native and so forth. And we've seen a huge shift in terms of what people have done and what companies have done and what they believe is sort of best practices in terms of really accelerating what they're doing and moving to the cloud, moving to the public cloud, and having cloud first policies and all those sort of things. And what's been interesting the last few months even, we're beginning to see kind of a shift. And for those of you, again, who haven't been in the industry for a long time, our industry has a tendency to, kind of go through cycles. And so what we'll see is, at the beginning of a cycle, there are a few new things, a few new ideas. There's some skepticism about it. There are some, early, very true believers that kind of get behind this. And then, as success tends to come from some new idea. So let me give you an example. So when AWS was first getting started, Netflix was one of the sort of poster, lighthouse accounts that was talked about. And we would hear from folks like Adrian Cockcroft and other folks from Netflix talking about how they were using AWS and how they were able to redesign their applications for new kinds of resiliency, and how they were going all in on the public cloud and were getting out of their data centers and all sorts of things like that. And again, it's kind of hard to imagine, but if you go back 10 years, there was a lot of skepticism about those types of things. And, as more and more companies were beginning to experiment with public cloud, experiment with microservices, experiment with using open source software and, doing things in new models, leveraging DevOps and all sorts of things, we started to see people go, okay, well, if they've done it and 10 other companies have done it and 100 other companies have done it, and I've heard talks at these 10 shows and, this, that, and the other, obviously momentum started to shift. And so what tends to happen in our industry is we have these new cycles come along. We have early believers. We have a lot of early doubters. The believers tend to sort of normalize with what the doubters do. Maybe it becomes 30-70 and then 40-60 and then 50-50. And then it, people, once it sort of gets past half, people start to go, oh no, that's the new trend. That's the way things are going to be. Everything should be that way. And we see all sorts of surveys and all sorts of stuff saying, hey, things are going in that new direction. But that's typically when things are going well. When things are going well, there's a belief that, new things are possible. that the companies that don't keep up with the new things are going to be left behind. We've seen this sort of headlines come out of the state of DevOps for a long time. And, in a lot of cases, the data backs it up. Whether or not it's as broad an industry trend is always the question that people have in their mind. But we see these trends go on. So now what we're seeing as the sort of hotness of the market is beginning to slow down. We're beginning to see, VCs send out letters to startup companies saying, "Hey, get your spending under control. Make sure you have a very solid business model." All those sort of things. We're starting to see the articles be written that are going to start sort of turning things in a different direction. And again, the cyclicalness we see in our industry is we tend to be centralized, and then we tend to be distributed, and then we tend to be centralized, and then we tend to be distributed, and then we tend to be centralized, and these patterns sort of happen every 5, 6, 8, 10 years or so when something takes off, and then if things aren't going as well, we start to sort of reevaluate, and we say, oh, well, maybe the problem is we're too centralized, or we're too decentralized, or whatever it might be. And what's interesting is we're now beginning to see a whole bunch of articles being written. We're starting to see some changes in the strategy from different vendors in the market and technologies in the market. So, for example, just in the last few weeks, I've seen articles written that say, microservices leads to nothing but giant balls of mud for applications. So we're going to see a lot of microservices was a bad idea. Nobody's really doing microservices. We're going to see a lot of that trend because, again, it sort of goes in the opposite direction of what we've seen for the last 5, 6, 7 years, which is microservices are great. The impacts of those things are great. And we're going to start to see people come back and go, we're going to start to see more and more conversations that, CIOs are going to double down on automation. They're going to double down on security. They're going to double down on things that, as our two professors talked about a few weeks ago, when things get tight, you tend to look for areas in which you can cut costs, or you can look to stabilize some things that maybe you haven't focused on for a while. And security tends to get, kind of ignored when things are going great and you're really just trying to go fast and you're trying to have, big new results. Automation tends to get sort of pushed beside because you can get around automation by hiring people and, great companies will automate, but not everybody automates. As things start to slow down and hiring starts to slow down, we'll start to see more and more talk about automation, about doubling down on security. You'll see companies reposition themselves as security companies. You will see VC investment increase around those types of things. So those things tend to happen. We're already beginning to see the articles come out, the Twitter threads come out about people moving back to the public or to the private cloud, about repatriation and about how public cloud spending is going to slow down and those types of things, right? And again, these are responses to, hey, there's a lot of growth happening in the public cloud, and that's where everything's going. And so you're going to start to see more and more of that. And again, whenever these new things happen, you got to remember sometimes our gut reaction to bad news is to go, okay, the best way to fix bad news is to go in the other direction. If we were going right, we're going to go left. If we were going up, we're going to go down, right? And just the same way that people should have been skeptical and looking for details and looking for examples and looking for best practices when the new technologies came along, whether it was a Kubernetes or microservices or serverless or whatever it might have been. You should also be, questioning when people start telling you, oh, no, we're going to change course. We're going to go in the opposite direction. We're going to flip where we were. But you will see a lot of this. You will see a lot of articles written. You will see, a lot of things talking about not how we can make developers productive, but how can we save money, right? So you're going to see a lot more articles about saving money, cost cutting, being more efficient than you're going to see about developer productivity, or you're going to see about digital transformation. Now, those things will still be out there. They're just going to get renamed because sometimes, if you haven't lived through one of these downturns, sometimes naming is really important. And sometimes negative naming is, like you don't want to be associated with certain things. We've talked about this in the past on the show. Like if you look at where the state of sort of new cloud native application development looks like, everybody is sort of rebuilding what looks like a PaaS platform, but nobody calls it a PaaS platform anymore because PaaS was sort of had a connotation to it that it had failed, right? Whether it did or not, there was sort of a connotation that it had failed. And so we moved on to something else. We just didn't call it PaaS. And I bring up that example because we're going to see people talking about, building distributed applications, building microservices, building, using things like DevOps and GitOps and SRE and so forth. We're going to hear those things, but you're going to hear them painted in a different light. And again, a lot of these things have to do with just, when things begin to change, when things begin to slow down, there's a natural inclination to say, well, that must have happened for some negative reason. Otherwise, the good times would have continued forever, which for those of you that study economics and other things, there are much bigger macro trends that are driving some of the changes that are happening in tech. But a lot of times, that's what's going to happen. So anyways, I'm going to make this sort of a short show. Again, hopefully everybody gets a chance to, if you get a chance, call your dad, give your dad a hug, give your mom a hug. That's how you got here. Just keep your ears and eyes open. Things will begin to change. The tone of the conversations will begin to change. And they'll change in ways that, will seem sort of strange because for the last 5, 6, 7 years, everything's been going in one direction. We've begun to see a plurality of people, moving in a certain direction, and we won't see a complete stop of that. We rarely see sort of a 180, but we will see a lot of people who will sort of kind of come back to kind of the opposite direction of where it was and try and convince you that that's the path forward. That's going to be the thing that's going to save you money, or that's going to be the thing that helps your company get through these tough times for the next, however long it's going to be. It could be 3 months. It could be 3 years. Who knows? Nobody really ever knows where the tops and bottoms of things are. But anyways, just kind of keep an eye on that. There's a couple of earlier shows that we did about, what some of these downturns look like, what they look like in previous years, maybe what some things that you can do to help position yourself from a job perspective, from a career perspective. But, wanted to do some periodic shows because, again, it is true that, if you haven't been around a downturn, it's different and people think different. When times get tough, managers tend to be what's the right word? More risk averse. They take less big bets. They take less chances. People tend to try and protect certain things, maybe. So, just kind of be aware that things will change. You need to adapt to them. Just sort of going full force in the same direction with the exact same way that things were before might not always work. Things may get more scrutinized from a finance perspective, and that's just kind of part of the natural cycle of our industry. So anyways, hope this was useful. Again, happy Father's Day to everybody who celebrates. Give your dad a call, and hope you're all doing well. And thank you for helping us grow the show. Like I mentioned, last month was the largest month we've had in history. And, we continue to see really good growth of the show. So thanks to everybody who listens. Thanks to everybody who tells a friend. And with that, we will wrap up and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.